Good evening and welcome to Ganashot and Jai Hind, Vanakkam and Sat Sri Akal. Today we are going to talk about Sinicisation of an ancient civilization. And to talk about this, I have with me the renowned Claude RP. Claude, welcome to Ganashot and Vanakkam to you.
Vanakkam, vanakkam.
Vanakkam, good. Uh, I don't need to introduce a person like Claude to all of you. These days, of course, he's staying in Puducherry and Orwell, and he keeps writing, and it's always a pleasure to read what he's written. Just in the evening, as I was saying, okay, how do we go about talking about all this? I got a blog of his from a friend of mine where he'd written about how, uh, you know, about 2017 Doklam crisis, and then he took us back into 1962. He wrote about an Indian army officer who was taken POW and how Chinese people carried out propaganda on him. And then, of course, when I mentioned to him, he told me that officer had just passed away. Anyway, at the outset, my condolences to the family. And Claude, thanks a lot for taking your time here. So, what do you think is going on in Tibet? Let me lead the thing out. And what do you think China is doing to Tibet and its civilization?
If you allow me, I would like to pay homage because you mentioned that officer, and there was 3,900 Indian Javan and officer who spent 6 or 7 months in Tibet, and most of them fought very well. And because we always speak about defeat against China in October, November 1962, but in many of the battles, whether it was, for example, the two Rajput in Namkachu or in Bumdela or in Wolong, many fought very, very well. I mean, in Delhi, the leadership didn't follow and really let them down. But so I want to pay homage to all these people who fought, who suffered, who spent 7 months in captivity in Tibet, and particularly to my old friend Brigadier Amarjit Behel, who passed away yesterday morning. He was from the 17th Field Command, Para in
17
Sangda.
Parafield, yeah.
Yeah, Parafield, and he had just been inducted. He was 21. He was a second lieutenant, and they had to march 7 days to reach that place, which is 14, 15,000 feet. And they fought very well. So I want just to pay homage to them. And when he was a POW in Tibet, it's the email that you received from me that they tried to escape with his officer commanding the Captain Talvar, who became Major General later, and the third one, they tried to escape, but at the last minute, it didn't work. So it was, I think, much better for them because they would have been caught and they would have. But these people fought very, very well. So that's I wanted to pay homage to
Yeah,
them.
I understand what you're saying. I have a same feeling. For the simple reason, my regiment was in Sela in 1962, and we lost one battery there. We lost 93 people, and about 100 odd people were taken POW into China. And I initially got commissioned into my regiment in artillery. Used to interact with a lot of these boys who had been taken POW. And then I realized that, but that the Indian leadership of that time, some military and some political leadership, let these boys down. And that was the feeling which they had. And I'm still in touch with a few of them. Like you said, my homage to all of them also. So let's get back to the present. And I know you've been writing a lot about Tibet and how things are going wrong there. And you also have a feeling that China is changing the civilizational values in Tibet. So let us hear your thoughts about that.
No, more recently, China has even changed the name of Tibet. Xishang has always been used by the Chinese as in Chinese, in Pinyin, they use Xinjiang for Tibet. But recently, they have officialized that this name should be changed, even in English. So now all their English publication is using Xinjiang and no more Tibet. So if you erase the name of a nation, a 2,000 years old nation, you erase the entire civilization. So, and for India, it has implication in the sense that the McMahon line, that northern border in Arunachal, has been signed with Tibet. Xinjiang has never existed at that time. So, what happened to that agreement? What happened to the line if you change the name? Similarly, China has changed the name of thousands and thousands of villages. I actually have a directory with nearly 40,000 names of villages, which there's a Chinese name, Pinyin name, Tibetan name, and English transliteration. So you change everything. I mean, in India, it happened also with the British. You know, Mumbai became Bombay, and Kolkata became Calcutta, and Madras, Chennai. But that was relatively very few. It was not going. If you go in the countryside, the villages were not changed. In the case of China, on the Tibetan plateau, they have systematically changed the name. So much so that in 1954, when the first confrontation happened in what is today Uttarakhand, Chamoli district, in one place which is called Barauti, which still disputed today, Chinese start calling Wuje. And the Indian diplomats have been scratching their head for a couple of years. What is this Wuje about? And they discovered that it was the same thing that Barauti. And they realized also that China didn't know where that Hujay was, because the principle to demarcate the border is a watershed. Now, watershed, you go by highest passes. So there's one pass called Tunjuna. It's clearly the border between India, Chamoli district, and Tibet. And that whatever Vujay or Barauti is south of this. So by changing the name, they create confusion. And more recently, they've also changed name in Arunachal Pradesh, that they are pretending it's their own territory. It has never been their territory. I mean, I have spent months in the archive, National Archive, and Nehru Memorial. I have found a lot of documents of the Shimla Convention and all. It's clear there's not a single Chinese. Not only that, but they were not claiming this area. In Shimla in 1913, 1914, they produced a map. They were claiming only half of what is today Arunachal Pradesh. So my point is, they have changed the name, but they have changed the post also. They have changed the border. They have pushed the border. And the typical case is in Ladakh also, where you have a line that 1956, Chou Enlai gave a map to Nehru and said that is our border. After you have a 59 map. After you have 1960 map. After you have a 1962, after the border conflict. And today, in May of 2020, they try to change again the LAC in 5 places. So there's this changing name, it's just to colonize this area. So that's a sad fate of Tibet. Tibetan today, they are not the master in their own country, and they can't even use the name of their different cities. Or Chigatse, the second city in Tibet after Lhasa, has become Rekatse. And similarly, Nari, the Western Tibet, the province of Western Tibet, has become reason why, because Chinese can't pronounce Nari, they can't pronounce Nari, so they say Hari. And when it's transcribed in Pinyin, it becomes Ali. That's
yeah,
tragedy.
what you said is right. But I have a question. When Tibet was taken over by the Chinese, there was a 17-point agreement, if you remember, right? And in that 17-point agreement, I think they called it Tibet. They didn't then call it Xinjiang, didn't they?
No, they call it Tibet. Yeah. But
Yeah.
in 1965 they divided the Tibet, historical Tibet, in 5 parts. One
Okay.
third is today the Tibetan Autonomous Region. Since last month they call Xinjiang Autonomous Region, Xinjiang, and the other part is Qinghai, Gansu, Sichuan, and Yunnan. They are being administered by these 4 provinces of China. So the original Tibet is less than half of what it used to be. So, and it's one of the first point that His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1987, when he presented his 5-point peace plan in Washington, D.C., in the US Congress, he said, I want these areas which have been ethnically Tibetan, who speak Tibetan, who have Tibetan monastery, they are practicing Tibetan religion, to be reunited in one unit. And China to this never agree. They say now we have divided in 1965. It's easier for administrative purpose. We will not change it. So again, China is splitting the entire Tibetan plateau in 5 parts so that to rule better.
Yeah. Now, this is one way. What you said, they've changed the names, they've changed the topography. I would say the geography, the political status of this, like you said, in 5 parts, which you have shown on the map also. Aren't they also sinicizing the religion? They've changed the religion and they've tampered with the religion quite a bit.
They keep the religion, but they especially since last 3 years, they sinicized the religion. And it's valid also for Islam in Xinjiang, as well as the Christian religion. All the religion in China after 2015 had to be sinicized. What means sinicizing Tibetan Buddhism? Tibetan Buddhism comes from India. It comes from Nalanda. All the tradition, the first monks were ordained by the abbot of Nalanda when he went to Tibet, Shankarakshita. Guru Padmasambhav came from Swat and built the first monastery in Samye. The entire tradition, whether it is the script or the grammar, everything comes from India, from these large viharas in northern India, and especially Nalanda. Now, this vihara disappeared when the Muslim invaded northern India in 13th century. But the fact is remained that Buddhism comes from India. Buddha is not born in mainland China. Buddha is born. Nepali will say he's born in Nepal, but he's born at the border. Lumindi is the border between what is Bihar today and Nepal. So he's from the subcontinent, he's South Indian, let's say. He's certainly not Chinese. So what does it mean to sinicize the Tibetan Buddhism? It means that instead of Buddha being, you take refuge in Buddha and the Sangha, but now you have to take refuge in Xi Jinping and the standing committee of the Politburo. No, it's not a joke, because every altar in Tibet, whether it's in a house or whether it's in monastery, you have one photo of Xi Jinping and one photo with 5 paramount leader, means Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Hu Jintao, and Xi Jinping. So that's the future for Tibet is not very bright today, as it is today.
So all these communist chaps want to become gods in Tibet. They all want to become gods in Tibet.
Yeah, I mean, communism is a religion, no?
Yeah.
You have to follow the first, on Mao Zedong's time, you have to follow the Red Book. Now you have to follow the collective
Xi Jinping thought.
So it's and if you don't follow, you will be purged very quickly, very fast, no? And
Yeah,
you've seen what has happened to the defense minister or the
finance minister.
minister for foreign affairs. I don't know if there's corruption or whatever behind, but the fact that they have disappeared and we don't know where they are.
Yeah,
Can you
I
imagine
agree with
today
you.
in India, the defense minister, Mantri, or the external affairs minister disappearing and nobody knowing where they gone? So you see the type of country it is, and you see the difference between a democracy, which is totally chaotic. We can see it every day. It's chaos, but at least it's a democracy. China is
Yeah,
a totalitarian country, and we don't know what has happened with the. And today in India, despite the chaos, you have a judiciary, you have a media, you have other pillars of that democracy which are alive. Hmm?
yeah, I think so also.
And
And
we have
don't you
election
think
also.
don't you think China has also changed the script and teaching? And because a lot of stories keep coming out about, that Tibetan is no more taught in schools, and people are not taught the ancient Buddhist scripts and all that. I believe that change is also happening as part of Sinicization, and they're only allowed to learn Mandarin.
It has always been, but now it's done more systematically. It has always been that in the sense that if someone speaks good Mandarin, he could get a government job or get him employed by the party and by the state. But now it has done more systematically. There are reports that 1 million of kids are in this.
So we'll just wait. What I was trying to get through to him and get it out of Claude was that the Tibetan children are being kept in exclusive schools, and they're taken away when they're about 3, 4, 5 years old, taken to these dormitories, or rather the residential schools, and kept, and they're taught only Mandarin, whereby their old, their mother tongue is not taught, and nothing is taught, and then they have to, to the extent, right through school, they are taught only Mandarin, and as a result, a person loses sight of his mother tongue. That is what is happening in China. Then, of course, there is a fact of this demographic change. I'm sure when he comes back, we'll talk to him about the demographic change also. There's a huge demographic change which is happening in Tibet, where a lot of people from central Tibet are being shifted along the border villages. So there, so that's one internal migration which is happening. And the second thing which is happening is that there are a lot of Chinese who are being settled in uh, Tibet in various places, right? With all this construction and everything, all the construction and the development which is happening in Tibet happens not through local Tibetans, it happens through Han Chinese. And those Han Chinese come, they stay for about 5 to 10 years through those projects, and then they go away. They have no permanent residence in Tibet. But because that number of people who are growing there means that the Tibetan, whole story in Tibet is changing rapidly. Okay. The next thing which I have, on this thing is that they're also solidifying. Part of Xi Jinping's plan is to solidify the border. Solidify the border with what? Tibetan villages. And these Tibetan villages are being, like I said earlier, are being populated by those Tibetans who are coming from the hinterland, one, and secondly, those Tibetans who are completely in line with the Chinese way of thinking. So tomorrow, when we have to tackle China along the border, we are looking at a condition where these people have to, uh, you know, we are going to find a set of villages which are quite hostile to us. Okay, here comes Claude back. Yeah, Claude, welcome back. I was just talking to people about the demographic changes which were happening. So maybe you could talk about the demographic changes. Claude back. Yeah, Claude, welcome back. I was just talking to people about the demographic changes which were happening. So maybe you could talk about the demographic changes. Claude back. Yeah, Claude, welcome back. I was just talking to people about the demographic changes which were happening. Yeah, you can take on. Yeah. 1 minute, Claude. Just keep on the thing. I'll just get out and come back in because I think there's a resounding happening. 1 minute, Claude. Just keep on the thing. I'll get out and come back because I think there's a resounding happening. 1 minute, Claude. Just keep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's some strength.
Oh, there is some. I'll have to get off again. Just be on the line. I'll have to close the thing and come back. There is some. I'll have to get off again. Just be on the line. I'll close the thing and come back.
Shall I log out?
Yeah. Are we okay now? Yeah, we are okay now. No. You might have to close your mobile. Yeah. Are we okay now?
No, it's.
One minute. Let me see. Let me know. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You were saying about the change of democracy on the.
Yeah. So I was saying that a whole lot of demographic
Your
changes
voice is
are-
not very clear.
Okay, let me see again. Voice is not clear. Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. So I was talking of demography, which is changing fast in Tibet, and China is changing the demography there. So, what are your views about that?
You mentioned border,
Yeah,
the importance of the border.
yeah,
Already when Xi Jinping was vice president in 2011, he mentioned the importance of the border. He said to govern China, you have to govern the border, you have to govern Tibet, and you have to govern the border. So now the scheme that has been put in place in 2016-17 is to build this Shaokang village, this so-called moderately well-off village, and to build this village on the Indian border. So now between 600 and 700 villages have been built, and some extremely close from the border. Now, many of these places where the villages have come up were inhabited. There is nobody living there. So it means that they have brought people from outside. Of course, if there was few people living around, they put them in a so-called nice house, these blocks that they have done, that they built very, very quickly. In a few months' time, they will build an entire village. But they will bring also Tibetan from other side of the plateau, I mean, northern side mainly, from Nakshu prefecture. They bring a lot of people from there, and they bring Han people. For India, it's a serious issue because if you change the demography of the border, for example, in Arunachal, all the border are these original tribes, the Mompa, the Adis, and different tribes. And they've been always facing the other side, and very often they have some relative or something that small pockets of the Indian tribal also, like in Pemake area in the Great Belt of the Brahmaputra. Now everything is being changed by bringing people from Nakchu or other place in Tibet and people, Han people. Many of these Han people, they are getting married with Tibetan, mostly Han men with Tibetan girls. There was some article 2 years back in Metok, which is north of Upper Siang, where Yalong Sampo enters and becomes the Siang and later on the Brahmaputra. In this area called Pemake, they had 500 or 600 mixed couple. Xi Jinping speaks of mingling like pomegranate seeds. Always
okay.
he has this word. So what does it mean? Mingling like pomegranate seeds it means that the Tibetans should be the same than Han. But as a population, Tibetan are only 6 million and Han are more than 1 billion. So at the end, what will happen? Tell me.
So, yeah, so that's the thing. Then there's the issue of the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama is not getting younger, and China wants to nominate their own Dalai Lama. Where do you see all this going? Because
I see
China
that
is
China will nominate in any case their own Dalai Lama. Now there's different possibilities. The first one, of course, is the reincarnation. The person passed away, and after 2-3 years, search party is looking for his reincarnation. They have vision of the person who has passed away has left detail later saying where he's going to come and like that. And issue is that there's a huge gap of 20-25 years in the succession period. And it's all historically, if you look at the history of 19th and 20th century, it has been period of weakness for the state. I'm not speaking about religious matters. I'm not speaking about the importance of religious reincarnation. But as on the political side, the state will become very weak because the 13th Dalai Lama passed away in 1933. The present Dalai Lama is born 1935. He's been enthroned in 1940. Now, till that person is a major, he cannot rule. You can't rule a state. I know that France has just selected a prime minister of 34, but usually when you're 15 or 20, you can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how someone 34 can rule a state, but even okay, let's say that he can manage after at the age of 20. It means a 20, 22, 25 years gap. And historically, the regents which have been nominated have not been up to the mark. They have start fighting between themselves. For example, the two regents of the present Dalai Lama, Reting Rinpoche and Taktra Rinpoche, they fought. There was never, in 1947, nearly civil war in Tibet. Similarly, in 19th century, there was 5 Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama comes to the age of 18, 19, and suddenly he passed away. I mean, it's very suspect, but there is no proof that but for China, it was a time that they start trying to impose their rules and regulation and their rule over the Tibetan plateau. So, in generally speaking, and politically, it's a very weak system. Now, I will not comment on the religious side. Now, there's another possibility, which in my view is better politically, that is an emanation. Like in the case of Shankaracharya, of Kanchipuram, you select junior Shankaracharya and you groom him, you initiate, you give whatever religious teaching or even political, you train
Yeah, you
him.
train him. Yeah.
Of course, now after 2011, Dalai Lama has withdrawn politically, and he has asked the Tibetan to elect themselves their leader. But you have to remember that Dalai Lama is such a personality that even if he doesn't uh, go into the day-to-day of politics, still he has enormous political influence on the Tibetan. If he says something, the prime minister or the president will not say a word. No, so I think that's an issue, and this brings instability to the state. And I think it should be decided as soon as possible, and hopefully that an emanation. I understand that more traditional people among the Tibetan diaspora, especially the monks, are not very keen for emanation. But whatever it is the decision of the Dalai Lama. And Indian state will not intervene, but Indian state should state clearly that also we don't want to have instability on our border. If you look when His Holiness goes to Ladakh, or he was in Sikkim 2 3 weeks ago, tens of thousands of people, more than a lakh in Ladakh when he went in July, are going in the street and to receive him and to welcome him. So he has enormous influence. There's no political leader who has such influence in the Himalayan belt. So even any political leader, nobody has influence like he has. So he is an important person for the government of India, and the government of India should say that we also wish that you take quickly a decision, and that because we are concerned by what is can happen to our border if there is a gap or if there is a vacuum. And as you know, as a China watcher, you know that China likes the vacuums. Whenever there is a
Yes.
vacuum,
They'll
if
come
you
and
give
fill it.
them a vacuum of 1 kilometer on the LAC, they will occupy that vacuum. So they are very good at occupying vacuum, and sometimes I create vacuums.
Yeah. Oh, but the next question I have is how much influence do you think Dalai Lama has within Tibet? I know because I met the Dalai Lama long back, right? I had blessings from His Holiness, and this was back and that was in Ladakh. And I think entire Ladakh was there on that day when he came there. Similarly, it's the same thing in Tibet. And even if you go to Arunachal Pradesh, it's the same thing. You go to Bomdila in that monastery, he's revered. Do you think Dalai Lama has still got relevance in Tibet?
I think so, but we can't prove it,
We
or
can't judge it.
if there is very little communication since 4 or 5 years, for example. The Tibetan in exile in India, it's very difficult to communicate with their family. Uh, they used to communicate, but with the condition that they should not speak a word about the Dalai Lama or anything about religion. They can speak, how you are, how is my cousin, how is the uncle, and this.
Okay.
Nothing about political happening in India, nothing about what is happening in Dharamsala. Everything is monitored. The level of monitoring in China, first in Tibet and Xinjiang, and also the entire nation, Chinese nation, is totally under the control of the party. You put one word in on the social media uh, that is not in line with the party line, immediately it is removed. So, and similarly in Tibet, every discussion that they can have on the phone is monitored. If you go outside your house and you buy 10 liters of petrol, most of the payment in Tibet are done, I think more than 95% of the payment are done by card or by even facial recognition or whatever the digital ways. So they know that, okay, this guy has taken petrol. Oh, there's with artificial intelligence, they can check if that guy has taken double petrol that day, so it can be questioned and like that. So I'm just taking that example, but it's for everything like that. So even if they have a feeling for the Dalai Lama, how can
They can't show it.
how can they today? We should ask China, let people from Ladakh cross over to Tashigang or to Rutok. Let them celebrate something together, even if it's Tibetan New Year. The Tibetan New Year is a secular
No, sir.
thing. Okay, we don't celebrate His Holiness birthday, but let people go and come this side, no? And
Yeah, but
similarly
they
between
will not do
Mona
it.
and Tawang, any place, let the LAC be a little bit porous. Let's see what will happen. Let's see what will
They,
happen.
from what little I have seen, these people, they will never allow it. In fact, they are very scared. If there is one thing China is scared, my own view is that China is scared of religion. And the moment you use
They're
religion,
scared of
they will,
democracy also, of
they
the
are scared
freedom
of
that
democracy
people have.
also.
If
Right.
you see on 6th July for His Holiness birthday in Ladakh, every village will celebrate. And I think
Yeah.
one thing you were asking me, what could the government of India do more for that? They should encourage people to keep their own culture on the border, on the Himalayan belt, and celebrate all these festivals, and just doing a lot of noise about it so that the other side sees. Because the other side always see we have a better infrastructure. You people are living very, especially for Arunachal, you have no infrastructure, you have no road. That is changing. But maybe we have no road, maybe we don't have infrastructure, but we have the freedom
Yes,
to
I agree
worship,
with you.
to pay homage to whoever we want. That is a big difference.
That's a big difference. There's no doubt about it. Uh, last point I want to touch upon. This is my reading of what has happened, and we could discuss. You see, I've been reading China from a long time. I've been reading about Tibet for a long time, everything. But it was for the first time since 2003, I started hearing this term called South Tibet. South Tibet doesn't exist. Historically, there was nothing called South Tibet. If you read any documents, any article, any journal, whether it's in China or from in India, till the 2003 memorandum was signed, there was no term as South Tibet. Today, they are talking of South Tibet. Uh, right? And of course, we call that area as Arunachal Pradesh. Don't you think India has to do something about this? Because South Tibet to me is an illegal term.
India can reiterate that the McMahon line is a line and there's nothing as such as South Tibet.
South Tibet.
Historically, I think that what has happened that in 1986, when the state of Arunachal
Arunachal Pradesh.
joined the Union of India, became a state, full state. At that time, they tried to find a way to counter that, and they changed the name in southern Tibet. Now, of course, I mentioned at the beginning, 2017, 2021, 2023, they changed the name of some of the places. First, 6 places in 2017, 15 places in 2021, and last year, 11 places, just to show that this is
In mind.
their thing. But historically, there's never been a Chinese presence. Not only that, but there was never a Tibetan presence, except there was no Tibetan presence, but there was a Tibetan influence for about 10% of what is today Arunachal Pradesh. The
Yeah, I
British,
agree with you.
Sir Mr. Richardson, who was the last British representative in Lhasa, and he served for 3 years the Indian government because India had nobody to with his knowledge. He prepared a map in 1945, and I don't think it's in the map that I've given you, but this map shows the Tibetan influence in what Nifa at that time. So it's about 10%. The main thing is Tawang up to Dirong. There's a
You're wrong,
small pocket
yes.
in Manchuka, Manikang area. A small pocket, very small. One in Pasiang, one Subansari, Takshin, like that, and a small one in Walong sector in Kao. That is very, very limited. The Tibetan influence. It doesn't mean that it's Tibetan, because you can say that Kinor also had some Tibetan influence, or Spiti or that. So, but it doesn't mean that it is Tibetan, and it doesn't mean that it's Chinese,
No,
because
no,
Chinese argument is if it was Tibetan, it was Chinese.
no. I have been to most of these places in Arunachal Pradesh. I've been right up to Kibitu. Most of the inhabitants there are not Tibetan. They might follow some customs of Tibet. They don't even follow Buddhism there. You don't When you go to those places, you don't see Buddhism, even recognized out there. People don't practice Buddhism in those areas. It is only mostly, like you said, in the Kameng sector, in Tawang and Derang up to Bumla. And these days it comes down to something like Tenga. Also, there is a lot of Buddhist influence out there. Otherwise, there was no Buddhism. First time when I went there, Buddhism was only north of Bumla. It was not even south of Bumla, right? That was long back. But then, be that as it may, I think we'll have to contend with this whole story. And I feel that the coming times are going to be quite, I wouldn't say critical, they're going to be quite difficult, because we'll have different stories now coming out. China's stories will continue. We will continue with our way of thinking. And what's more important is that, this historically, whenever the central authority in China was strong, right? You found that the Tibet and Xinjiang were part of China firmly. But whenever the central authority in China was weakening, both these people started putting up their flag. Now, with China having some problems internally and economically and also demographically, do you foresee some change happening in this entire structure that Tibet can get back to itself?
I just can hope, but it's very difficult. But the only thing I know that China is very fragile today. Every day you have news of purge or economic crisis and all. So even the Xi Jinping, when you have one man who's ruling an empire, is much weaker than when there's a collegial leadership. And Deng Xiaoping had that intelligence to built collegial leadership for China. Now everything is Xi Jinping. So you're a gunner, you're gonna shot. So it's easier to shoot down one man. And it seems that
The-
there was some news in the afternoon that again some very senior leader has been arrested. And I don't know if it's true or if it's a rumor. There's a lot of rumors, but the rumor was that people are gunning for Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping.
So uh, you're the right person, the gunner,
No,
to
no,
understand that it is much easier to gun one person. Now,
one
of
person,
course,
yes.
Tibet fate is linked to what will happen to China.
China, yeah.
I remember in 1986, I had audience with His Holiness in Delhi, and I asked him what will happen to Tibet. Will Tibet will be free? He said, "I can tell you one thing: we cannot do anything. We are 6 million Tibetan, and we are non-violent people. We cannot take on. Even if we were violent, it would be stupid because they will crush us because they are more powerful and they are more than 1 billion." Now he said that something will happen in China, and maybe at that time there'll be some changes possible. And I think it's what you were saying that only when something happened to China, it's not the Tibetan with non-violence or with violence we will change anything.
Yeah.
China is too powerful. I told many Tibetan friends, look what's happening in Moldo, Susul, when they negotiate. Uh, they are tough negotiator, and most of the time they make out the best of the opponent. And in that case with India, India has 60 or 17,000 troops facing China,
China.
and still they're managing to get things in Moldo, in Ladakh. So when you have just non-violence, because the opponent has to understand your language.
Yes.
You know the history of Mr. A.P. Venkateswaran. He was
Yeah.
before becoming Foreign Secretary of India. He used to be ambassador in Beijing, and at that time, that movie Gandhi.
Gandhi, yes.
No? And the Chinese Politburo and Standing Committee were very keen to watch movie. They had in Shanghai, they had the studio and they could watch movie. So from time to time, the embassy would giving them movie. So they asked for Gandhi movie. So Mr. Venkateswaran gave them the movie, and after a few days, someone brought the movie. So he said, what the leadership in Shanghai has, Deng Xiaoping and all, thought of that movie. So that man would not answer first. And finally he said, what is it? We don't understand what is non-violence about. My point is, if your opponent doesn't understand what you're
Yeah,
talking
I
about,
agree with you.
that is a problem. In
Yeah.
China, today, Xi Jinping China, it's not the Chinese race or anything like that, because Taiwan is very different in one way. But today, the Communist Party under China doesn't understand this.
Yeah.
You can try Ladakh your luck. If you speak about nonviolence and be a good guy, they just don't understand.
Yeah.
So, but if you face them like in Doklam, in June, July, August 2017,
2017.
uh, people were standing like that. No, the guns were at the back. No question of using guns. It was not a violent clash, but you have to hold them to say no. You don't go. So I think let's see what happened in China. But unless something happened in China, it's very difficult for the Tibetan to fight against or whatever they want, whether middle path or some genuine autonomy. Today, in my views, it's absolutely impossible in the current situation with Xi Jinping ruling everything.
Yeah, I think we've had a great set of views from you. I'll take some questions. I would request the audience to pose a few questions. Some of them are here. Some of you should pose a few questions. Please come up with them. Okay, this is Shritik Kotari. He says, since the Chinese have a habit of claiming new territory by making vague historical civilization references, why can't Bharat claim Mansarovar and Kailash Parbat? We predate China. And this is a favorite question which I keep getting asked many times. So, what are your views about it?
My view is that Bharat is not China, and Bharat is not acting like China. So, in India or Bharat has never been aggressive, but it is true that China keep adding to the claims. Like if you take May 2020 in Ladakh, there was absolutely unnecessary, though there is no exchange of maps for the LAC or the international border. Everyone knew in Chinese PLA or the Indian Army was the LAC was, whether in Galwan or Hot Spring or in Depsang. Everyone knew where the PP, the patrolling points are, where the Indian troops could patrol and where the Chinese troops could patrol. But they try to change even in this place. And let's be frank that they have never been anywhere in Xinjiang or in Aksai Chin or around the Chinese people. Aksai Chin was not habited, but most of the other places like Demchok, the last village in Ladakh, Chinese were not there. There was exchange with so much so that for centuries there was no need of marking the border to put a fence or anything like that. Everyone knew that crossing Demchok, you go to Tashigang, you're in Tibet, and vice versa. So, and there was never, India has never tried to grab land from them. So, but to grab Kailash Mansarovar, India should first get back Aksai, because that would not be a very easily
Yeah,
militarily
easy task to do.
and just
Right.
claim. You see, in near Kailash, about 30 kilometers from Kailash, 25, 30 kilometers, there's a village which belongs to India. It's called Minsar. In 1684, there was a treaty between Ladakh and Tibet, and they gave that village to the Ladakh. Later on, it became the Dogra after the 1846. But this village, when the negotiation took place for the Panchil, someone asked the government, "What shall we claim that village?" And the government at that time said, we cannot claim it because we can't do anything about it. That was the opinion of the political officer in Sikkim, unless we can do something about it. So today we can claim Kailash, but what will we do?
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Right? Eklavya says, Pranam Lieutenant Sir, first time in your channel. Welcome. Please come back more. Okay, this is a question to you. Is Sinicization of Tibet a reversible or irreversible damage already done to Tibet by the Han Chinese? How is local Tibetan population trying to protect itself from further Sinicization?
I think everything is reversible. Buddha would have said that everything is reversible. There's nothing which is not reversible. The Dalai Lama, since he came in 59, has really done a lot of work to preserve his religion, whether in the monastery in South India or elsewhere, or in Dharamsala. And so the tradition in most of the cases preserved outside Tibet. Now, if tomorrow Tibet would be independent, I don't think it will happen soon. But if it, everything could be reversed. We have seen it in outer Mongolia and all. They had gone through the most horrible times with communists, and Buddhism has come back. So because it's a faith, and this China can destroy everything rebuild the road, build infrastructure, but the face, what is inside the human being, is very difficult to have. And as long as the face is there, this they can't touch because Tibetans don't have even to say. So I think it answered also the second part of the question, that trying to protect itself from further civilization. Of course, it's very difficult, and Tibetans have no choice. For example, not to put a photo of the Dalai Lama in their house. If you look these villages, this Xiaohang village, what is striking, you don't find any prayer flag. You don't find any prayer this all money, but all money. You know, every village in Ladakh, all along the road, you see the stupa, the shaitan.
Mm.
So I think people presently have to keep this thing in their heart. Their certain or their prayer
No
wheel.
chotans and no flags, no nothing.
At
Okay.
that time, they replaced the flag today by the Communist Party, but inside them, I think they know which flag is flying. It's my
Okay.
view.
Yeah, I agree with you. You can't change the way people. Right. Ask any chance of implosion of CCP power, maybe 10 to 20 years time. That he's spoken of. He said at this point of time, I also feel so. Xi Jinping is weak, right? And if my view, let me put it this way: if my view is, if tomorrow, in the next 3, 4 years, 5 years, if Xi Jinping is, something happens to him, he's thrown out or anything, the next set of people who come will not give China a very stable government. That's my view, and that's the history of China. And then, if you see, you project it into 4, 5 years from now, where the economy will then not will get hampered, and the demography is declining, you might see China imploding. But that's in the future, right? We can't really say so. But that's one possibility. Maybe someday I'll discuss about it. Okay.
Yes, people.
Uh,
You say, can
yeah,
I add?
yeah, yeah. Please.
People like Gordon Chang, who has predicted the collapse of China since 25, 30 years. Maybe if we keep prophetizing this, maybe it will happen one day, but
It'll
it's
happen
not
one
going
day.
to
Yeah.
happen just like that. But if you look at the last 3 years, 4 years, since the COVID, which originated from a lab in Wuhan, everything has changed. The way the world sees China. Even for India side, Prime Minister really tried to accommodate China. Prime Minister went to Wuhan. He received President Xi Jinping in Mahabalipuram. Since then, since the COVID, since the Ladakh confrontation, everything has changed. That COVID has come from a P4 lab in Wuhan. And who gave that lab in Wuhan? The French government and the Americans.
Americans,
They
yes.
trusted so much China, and that they gave a P4 lab, which is the highest level of technology. They would have never given to India that P4 lab. They have given, and now they've learned their lesson. I think at least I can hear when President Macron speaks. I think he's very careful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's learned his lesson.
Similarly for the business people. Business, they trusted fully China. Everyone thought that they'll go to billions and billions of dollars they will make in China. Now, every slowly people are withdrawing. So, what will happen next? It will make China weaker and weaker, and obviously there'll be more unemployment. There'll be a possibility of social unrest. So that's something happened, something which has changed relatively recently.
Yeah,
So
I
we can
think so.
keep predicting, but we don't know when will
We
it
don't
happen.
know. Yeah, yeah. That's a possibility. That's about all. Right. No, this not this. Where's that question? Yeah, yeah. What he's asked is, he says, how can we show a ray of hope to our Tibetan brothers? Should we support them more diplomatically? I mean, what he's asking is, how can India support Tibet better? That's about all. How do you think more we can do than what we are doing?
I think India has not been supporting since '59. When His Holiness came in exile, he had 4 hours meeting with Nehru in May of '59 in Missouri, and Nehru said, "I will rehabilitate your people and I will educate your youth." And India has done this. But at the same time, Nehru said, politically, I will never help you. And he refused even that to be part of the 1959, 61, and 65 UN resolution. Though in 65 there was some change because by that time Lal Bahadur Shastri was prime minister. But there was never, actually, apart from Lal Bahadur Shastri, who before going to Tashkent called Dalai Lama's representative in Delhi, Mr. Chakaba, and called him and said, when I come back from Tashkent, I will recognize your government in exile. He went to Tashkent and never came back. So that's part of the tragedy of Tibetan. So it means also that it's possible for someone one day to say, okay, I will at least recognize your government in exile, your administration officially. The Ministry of External Affairs never been inclined to diplomatically take a stronger position, probably fearing a reaction from the China. But you should not forget that that MACMA online. I have been recently going to each and every paper, each every cable report, everything in the archives about the Shimla Conference, which resulted in the MACMA online. At that time, British India, McMahon was the foreign secretary, fully recognized that Tibet is independent. The only issue was the border between China and Tibet. That was the main objective of the conference, to find an agreement, because China was bringing the border much more west, and China and Tibet was much more east. So there's a different line, and with war going on between in this buffer, the line kept changing. So the objective of the Shimla was to fix this. But China never objected during in 1914, 1913, 1914. China never objected to that MACMA line where it is today, which is between Arunachal and the real southern Tibet. So that India cannot deny that that border is with the Tibetan government. Otherwise, there is
Yeah,
no MACMA.
yeah, I think so. I think we'll stop here, Claude, because we've gone past 1 hour, and I must thank you for the way you put across things, because you've given a completely different perspective to the audience. Tomorrow, when everyone in Gunnershot sees this thing, they'll get a completely different perspective, and I must thank you for it. Right? Because they're used to my perspective of Tibet, my perspective, which is completely a military mind, right? And you come with a, a totally different perspective, which is a fresh perspective, which will make us think. And I think, and I go with you, and I think somewhere the government of India has not done enough to support the Tibetan cause. And that's always been my grouse. Right? And for why we have not been able to do so is something which I have never been able to understand myself. Because I have served in Ladakh. I have served in the central sector in Darchula and that area, and I have served in Sikkim. I have served in Kameng sector. I have served in Kibitu. All these places along I have served, but I have never got the clear idea as to why we have balked. Okay, I think he's gone offline. Right. With this, on behalf of all of you, I thank Mr. Claude RP for coming here. And he said, "Look, I can't last for 1 hour, but he's lasted more than 1 hour." And on behalf of all of you, I thank him. And Jai Hind, till tomorrow, when we are going to discuss what are the purges which are going on in China, and what purges is Xi Jinping doing, and is his reign under threat? So that's something, an interesting discussion we'll talk about tomorrow. Till then, good evening and Jai Hind.